Adais Okonkwo stepped into the sleek lobby of Zenith Innovations, and the air in the room seemed to freeze. She could feel every eye on her, some intrigued, others full of judgment, as they took in the sight of her and her daughter, Era, walking in like they owned the place. Adai's steps were measured, confident, but inside, her heart was pounding. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in this pristine corporate building, not in front of all these people. But this moment had been 11 years in the making. She had walked away once, fleeing the rejection of a family that saw her as nothing more than an obstacle, but today was different. Today, she was walking toward the very thing she had kept hidden from the world for over a decade, the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most, and the daughter he didn't even know existed. Era, only 10 years old, tugged at her mother's sleeve, sensing the shift in the air but not understanding the magnitude of what was about to happen. "Why is everyone staring?" Era whispered, the unease in her voice unmistakable. "Stand tall. We belong anywhere we choose to be," Adais said, the words a quiet but firm promise. She had said them to Era many times before, when the world felt too heavy, too cold. The child nodded, trying to mirror her mother's strength. When they reached the front desk, the receptionist, her smile frozen, stared at them with wide eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, voice strained, clearly caught off guard by their sudden presence. Adais didn't hesitate. "We're here to see CEO Kang Ji-hoon. I'm sure he'll want to see us." The receptionist's face shifted, a flicker of recognition passing through her features before she turned away, whispering something into her headset. The tension in the air thickened, and just as Adais was about to ask if they could wait, the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Kang Ji-hoon, 33 years old. The youngest CEO in Zenith Innovations history. A picture of success. Dressed in a sharp Tom Ford suit, he looked every bit the part of Korea's most eligible bachelor, the man Forbes Asia had dubbed the one to watch. But as his eyes met hers, something shifted in his expression. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the marble floor, his face draining of color as his gaze landed on Era. It took a moment before he could speak, his voice barely a whisper. "No, this isn't. You can't be." Adais watched him, knowing what was coming. She had spent years preparing for this moment, but now, seeing him again after so long, she realized nothing could have prepared her for the sight of him looking at his daughter, who had his features, his eyes. "Look at her, Ji-hoon. Really look at her," she said, her voice colder than she'd meant it to be. Era, ever the brave little soul, bowed low and introduced herself. "Hello, father. My name is Kang Era. I'm 10 years old." Then, as if to make sure he understood, she switched to flawless Korean, something Adais had worked hard to teach her. "I've been waiting to meet you." The lobby exploded in whispers, and Ji-hoon stumbled back, his hand gripping the wall behind him. His face cycled through disbelief, recognition, panic, and then, slowly, something else, something almost too painful to watch. "You kept her from me?" His voice broke. "You hid my child from me?" 11 years, Adais corrected, her voice firm but low. "And I didn't hide her. Your family made it clear that we weren't welcome." Ji-hoon's eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape. But there was none. The truth was undeniable. Era's resemblance to him, to his very blood, was too much for anyone to ignore. His fingers shook as he wiped them across his face, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What's going on here?" A sharp voice cut through the air, and a woman in a Chanel dress stormed into the room. Her gaze flicked between Ji-hoon, Adais, and Era, narrowing when she saw the child. "Who are they?" Sujin, Ji-hoon's fiancé, had no idea what she was about to walk into. The moment she laid eyes on Era, the truth became clear. This child was Ji-hoon's daughter. But that didn't stop her from stepping forward with a smirk. "You've been hiding a child from me," she spat at Ji-hoon. "We're getting married in 3 weeks, and you're just now telling me about her?" Era, looking up at the woman with innocent curiosity, asked, "Are you father's friend?" Sujin's smile faltered, her composure cracking. "I'm his fiancé." The word hit like a bomb, and Era's face fell. She turned to Adais, confused. But Mama said father wasn't married. Adai's heart broke as she saw the hurt in Era's eyes. No, love, he's not. But the damage had already been done. Era, in that moment, had understood far too much for a 10-year-old. She had seen the rejection in Sujin's eyes. She had felt the sting of not being wanted. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Adai's could feel the walls closing in on them. She pulled Era close, her hand firm on the child's shoulder. "Let's go," she whispered, but Era resisted, her small voice filled with hurt. "Mama, why did grandmother say we were a mistake? Why didn't she want us?" Adais took a deep breath. "Grandmother is wrong, love. You're not a mistake. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." As they walked toward the exit, Era clinging to her side, Adais couldn't help but feel the weight of what she had just exposed. This wasn't just a family reunion. This was a battle for everything they had fought for. The world had rejected them once, and now it was coming for them again, in a way that only the powerful could. Adais barely slept that night, the events of the day spinning in her mind, but what kept her up most of all was the look on Era's face. The child had been so hopeful, so certain that she would be accepted. It tore at Adais to see that innocence shatter so quickly. The ride back to the hotel had been silent, save for the soft rhythm of the rain against the windows. Era had clung to her, her small hand trembling in Adai's grip as they made their way through the storm. When they finally reached their room, Adais had tried to reassure her, telling her that they were safe, that things would get better. But she knew deep down that the real battle had just begun. Era was too young to understand the intricacies of what was happening, but Adais couldn't keep the truth from her much longer. She had already carried that burden alone for far too long. The next morning, the phone call came. Adais answered without a word, recognizing the number on the screen. "Miss Okonkwo," the voice on the other end said, cool and professional. "This is Attorney Park from Zenith Innovations Legal Department. We need to discuss a non-disclosure agreement and paternity verification." Adai's stomach dropped. She barely heard the rest of the conversation. The offer, £500,000 in exchange for silence, was as insulting as it was tempting. But it wasn't just the money. It was the message. They wanted her to disappear again. To take the money, to forget about Era's father, and to keep quiet about everything that had happened. The fear, the threats, the promises of destruction if she didn't comply. "Tell your client I'm not interested," Adais said, her voice shaking despite her attempt at composure. "I'm not leaving, and I'm not silencing myself or my daughter." The lawyer was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll pursue alternative legal remedies. Defamation. Fraud. You've made a mistake, Miss Okonkwo." "I've made no mistake," Adais said, her voice low but resolute. "But you will." The call ended, leaving her breathless, her mind racing. She didn't know what was worse, the threats or the cold certainty in the lawyer's voice. They weren't just trying to buy her off, they were preparing to destroy her. Minutes later, another message arrived. It was a photo of Era asleep in the hotel bed, taken from outside their window. The message below was short, chilling. "Beautiful child. It would be a shame if anything disrupted her peaceful life." The fear that gripped Adai's heart was like nothing she had ever known. She rushed to the window, checking the locks, making sure the room was secure. But even with the doors and windows locked tight, she knew she couldn't protect Era from everything. Not when the Kang family was willing to do whatever it took to get rid of them. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Ji-hoon. "I just heard my mother's lawyer contacted you. Please don't make any decisions until we talk. I'm coming to the hotel now." Adais stared at the message, her heart a mix of emotions. Ji-hoon, her love, her loss, the man who had promised her everything and then disappeared, was reaching out again. She wasn't sure she could trust him, but something in his words made her believe that maybe, just maybe, he had finally realized the depth of the damage he had caused. Before she could reply, there was a knock at the door. Adai's heart skipped in her chest. She had barely opened the door when hotel security stepped into the room, demanding identification. "We received a complaint about suspicious activity," one of the men said, his voice flat, his eyes scanning the room. "We need to verify your identity." Adais felt her blood run cold. This wasn't security. This wasn't a random check. Someone was watching them, and someone was making sure they were intimidated. She moved to the phone, ready to call the front desk and confirm if this was legitimate, but before she could dial, another voice cut through. "Step away from that door now." Adai's breath caught. She recognized the voice instantly. It was Ji-hoon. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, rain-soaked and frantic. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice sharp with the kind of fear that had been growing in her chest since she arrived in Korea. "They were here to serve you with legal papers," Ji-hoon said, his voice low, urgent. "Emergency custody papers. My mother is filing for guardianship of Era." Adai's knees buckled, and she reached out for the door frame to steady herself. "She can't do that," she whispered. "She can't just take my daughter." Ji-hoon looked at her, his eyes dark with regret. "In Korea, she can. She can claim Era is a Korean citizen through me, and that you're an unfit mother because you've been hiding her from me for 11 years. "No," Adai said, shaking her head, disbelief clouding her thoughts. "I'm not unfit. I raised her. I protected her. I did what you couldn't." "I know," Ji-hoon said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "But my mother has resources, money, power, influence. She has lawyers and judges and connections that she'll use to make sure Era is taken from you. She's already started the process." The world seemed to tilt beneath Adai's feet. "We have to fight this." "We'll fight it," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she felt the weight of the odds bearing down on her. How could they fight a system so set against them? Ji-hoon's expression hardened. "I'm not letting her take Era. But we have to move fast." The panic that had taken root in Adai's heart grew into something more, something cold and determined. She couldn't lose Era. Not now, not after everything they had been through. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady despite the terror that gripped her. Ji-hoon didn't answer immediately. He was already moving, stepping toward the elevator. "We're leaving now," he said, urgency in his voice. As they rushed out into the pouring rain, Adais tried to steady herself, to focus on the steps ahead. They didn't know what would happen next, but they couldn't stop now. Too much had been lost. Too much was at stake. Era, who had been silent since the moment they left the hotel room, finally spoke. "Mama, can grandmother really take me away from you?" Adais turned to face her daughter, a tight smile on her lips, but her heart was heavy. "No, baby. No one is taking you away from me." But as they drove through the streets of Seoul, Adais couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, and not in the way she had hoped. The following day, the courtroom was a battlefield, and Adais could feel the weight of every step as they entered the cold, imposing building. She had never expected this fight to be easy, but the reality of it, the sharp, unyielding atmosphere, was something she had only feared in the deepest corners of her mind. Ji-hoon stood beside her, a shadow of the man she had once known, but now, his face was set with something resembling determination, though his usual confidence had been shattered. The two of them, once so full of love and dreams, now faced each other as adversaries in a struggle for Era's future. Era's hand was small in Adai's, a stark contrast to the looming, intimidating space they found themselves in. The child had been quiet, her usual energy subdued by the weight of the situation. Adais could see the confusion in her eyes, but Era still trusted her, still held on, despite the uncertainty of what was to come. They stood across from Mrs. Kang, who was flanked by her team of polished lawyers, and Adai's stomach twisted with a mixture of anger and sorrow. The woman who had once looked at her with disdain, offering money to make her disappear, now stood like a queen in her element, unmoved, unshaken. She had orchestrated everything from the shadows, and now she was fighting to reclaim what she believed was hers. Her pride, her family's reputation, her son's future, none of it mattered more than keeping Era away. "Everything that woman has done has been calculated to destroy me, to destroy our family," Mrs. King hissed, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "This is not about a child. This is about power, control, and everything we've built." Adais could hardly believe the venom in her voice, But she had long stopped underestimating the woman who had tried to bury her. This was more than just a custody battle. It was a war of wills, and Mrs. Kong would stop at nothing to win. Just as Mrs. King's lawyer stood to present their case, Ji Hoonei stood abruptly, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't stand by and let you destroy everything I once loved," he said, his eyes meeting Adai's with an apology that she wasn't sure she could accept. "I've been weak, but I'm not running anymore." With a shaking hand, he pulled out his phone, and to the shock of everyone in the courtroom, he played a series of recordings. Mrs. King's voice echoed through the room, admitting to everything she had done to undermine Adai's life, to ruin her chances, to manipulate the court system. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Ji Hoonei revealed everything: the sabotage, the bribery, the lies. He had documented it all, and now there was no way for his mother to hide behind her wealth and influence. As the recordings played, the walls Adai's had feared would close in on her seemed to crumble. For the first time, Ji Hoonei was standing with her, not just in body, but in truth. The battle was far from over, but this was the moment that changed everything. The judge, a stern woman who had been silently absorbing the evidence, now turned to Mrs. King, her gaze unyielding. "You've lied, you've manipulated, and you've put your own ambitions above the well-being of a child. This is not just a custody case. This is a case of parental abuse, of a child's basic right to a family, and you've forfeited your right to take that child." For the first time, Mrs. King's mask of control slipped. The realization hit her like a wave. She had lost. The room erupted into hushed murmurs, and Adai's, her heart still pounding, could hardly believe the words that followed. "Miss Okonkwo," the judge said, her voice firm and resolute, "you will have full custody of Era. Effective immediately." Tears sprang to Adai's eyes, but she blinked them away. This wasn't the victory she had imagined, the one where her daughter could be wrapped in the warmth of a family that had always loved her. But it was something much more precious. It was the truth, and it was justice. Era, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, was now looking up at her mother, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Does that mean we can go home, Mama?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. "Yes, love," Adai's whispered, her voice breaking. "We're going home." As the courtroom emptied, Adai's and Ji Hoonei stood for a long moment, neither of them saying anything. The silence was filled with the weight of everything that had happened, everything they had lost, and the fragile possibility of what might still be possible between them. He had chosen to stand by her now, but the past couldn't be undone. In the days that followed, things didn't immediately return to normal. There were legal battles yet to be fought, consequences to deal with, but one thing was clear: Era was safe. Adai's had kept her promise. She had given her daughter the truth, and now they could move forward together. But there was still one more surprise waiting for Adai's. As she walked out of the courthouse, a text pinged on her phone. It was from Ji Hoonei. "I'm sorry, Adai's. I've been a coward for far too long, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I know I don't deserve this, but I need you to know I've chosen Era. I've chosen you. Always." Adai's breath caught in her throat. She had been prepared for the possibility that Ji Hoonei would never truly be a part of their lives again. But now, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was ready to try again. But she couldn't think about that now. They had a long road ahead, and it wasn't about him anymore. It was about Era, about their family, and about building something real this time. As she looked down at her daughter, who was holding her hand tightly, Adai's felt the weight of the world lift, if only for a moment. This wasn't just the end of a custody battle. It was the beginning of a new life, a life that, against all odds, they could call their own.